Missing and disappeared people continues to be a real crisis all over the world. With the United States alone, 600,000 people go missing each year. Out of those 600,000 people, approximately 4,400 unidentified bodies are recovered each year. But every so often, there is a disappeared person's case that is so bizarre that even when the person is found, it raises still more questions than answers. You are now within minutes of horror, and your only chances of survival is hitting that like button. With that being said, let's continue on with the video. One of the weirder missing person cases actually started on a day that was pretty normal. It was Super Bowl weekend of 1993, and on January 28th, the wife and young daughter of 39-year-old attorney and American Bar Association member David Glenn Lewis left their home in Amarillo, Texas, to go on a weekend shopping spree to Dallas, which was about 400 miles away from their home. The mother and daughter duo often went out on these day trips to Dallas, so there was no reason to think that this would be anything other than another fun day out, and it was until they returned home a couple days later on the 31st. They came back to a quiet house with Lewis nowhere to be seen, and indeed, it seemed as if he had just casually stepped outside for the moment. There were freshly made sandwiches in the refrigerator. His wedding ring and watch were up on the kitchen counter. The TV and video recorder had been set up as if to record the Super Bowl. Laundry was in the dryer, and it seemed that Lewis would be coming home at any moment. Lewis's family had suspected that he had gone over to a friend's house to watch the game and would be home later. However, Lewis never did come home, and this would be the beginning of a strange mystery and a bizarre series of events that would baffle the authorities and incite discussion and debate even to this day. When authorities were contacted on February 1st, they quickly found there was no sign of a burglary or a break-in, no signs of a struggle, so foul play was not entertained at the time. They found that the video player had started recording the game but had not been stopped after it had finished, and they would also soon determine that he had last been seen by neighbors on January 30th. Lewis's car did not take long to be found either. Located on February 2nd, abandoned at the Potter County Courts building in downtown Amarillo, as if he had just come to do some law work, and all the cash and credit cards, as well as the keys to both his house and car, had been left behind, as if he had planned to come back to the vehicle. So where was he? No one had a clue. In the meantime, police were able to piece together a rough timeline of the days leading up to his disappearance, although this made it, perhaps, even more convoluted and confusing. From interviews with co-workers, they found that he had left his law office early on the 28th, going home at around noon after complaining of not feeling well. Nevertheless, he showed up to teach a course at Amarillo College that evening, and then there were some strange clues from some witnesses who had claimed to have seen him after that. Now, a friend of his has claimed to have seen Lewis at the local Amarillo airport without his luggage, and several other witnesses, including a sheriff's deputy, had seen the man around town, describing him as looking very nervous and tense. Some other odd clues turned up that someone had deposited $5,000 into Lewis's bank account on January 30th, and on January 31st, someone had purchased 2 airline tickets, one from Dallas to Amarillo and another from the Los Angeles International Airport to Dallas, both in his name. Even stranger is the fact there were no tickets found for the flights out to these places, just return tickets. But why? And what connection did any of this have to his disappearance, if any? No one knew, but with no evidence of foul play at all, at the time police assumed that he had just voluntarily left his life behind. Although the police did not think there was any foul play involved, Lewis's family were not so sure. According to them, he was a loving family man who adored his wife and daughter, and who was also very committed to his work, and had additionally been heavily involved in community and charity activities. Everyone who had known him insisted that David Lewis would have never left his job, family, and community responsibilities behind willingly. According to family and friends, his days as a lawyer and former judge had caught up with him, either in the form of a vindictive, disgruntled defendant or someone wanting to interfere with an important upcoming court case he had been involved in which he was to testify in a malpractice suit filed against his former law firm. Interestingly, the wife of David Lewis would also claim that Lewis's file on the case had vanished at around the same time he had vanished, and that he had expressed fears that his life was in danger. Coincidence or not, regardless of all this, police still found no evidence to pursue it, and the case of David Lewis went cold. It would not be until another, seemingly unrelated unsolved mystery 1,600 miles away was looked at a decade later that there would be any new development, and it would all get even weirder. Across the country, just outside the small town of Moxie, Washington, there was another unsolved mystery going on at the same time Lewis had disappeared. On February 1st, 1993, a man had been seen by startled motorists walking down the center line along Route 24, but was struck and had his life ended in a hit-and-run incident before anyone could help him. The man, who had been wearing military-style clothing and work boots, had no identification on him. His fingerprints didn't show up in any databases, and police were unable to identify the mystery man. This case would be baffling for some time and was never solved, languishing in the realm of cold cases right alongside with Lewis. But this would all change in 2004. At that time, a Washington State Patrol detective by the name of Patrick Ditter was looking over some old cold cases on the internet, and one of them happened to be the dead John Doe from Washington. As Ditter was tracking down the information and physical characteristics of missing persons from the same time frame, he came across a picture of the vanished David Lewis, who just happened to look very much like the photo of John Doe. Ditter had a hunch and looked into this, becoming more and more convinced that John Doe was David Lewis, and eventually DNA confirmed it, solving both seemingly unrelated cold cases in one swoop, but hardly solving the overall mystery. The most pressing mystery is, why was Lewis all the way over in Washington to begin with? He had no business there, no friends or family who lived in Washington, had never even been there, and had made no mention about going to Washington at all. Everyone that knew Lewis was sure he had no reason for why he would want to even go there. He had no connection to Washington at all. So how did he manage to be walking along the center lane of a highway to end up dead there? Lewis's family and friends suspected that he had been kidnapped, but if that was the case, then who had done it and why? Why would they have taken him to Washington? Also, if he had been kidnapped, then how did he wound up walking alone down that highway, and why didn't he call out for help to passing vehicles? Another idea is that he could have gone out there for unknown reasons, perhaps specifically choosing Washington precisely because it was a place he had never been before. Yes, it's very possible he could have gone out there on his own and this was all just a tragic accident, but that still doesn't answer why he was in Washington, or why he was walking in the middle of the highway wearing military clothes. If this was a way for him to end his own life, if so, then why do it in Washington? In fact, how did he even get to Washington in the first place? The plane tickets were for nowhere near there, and he had left his car behind. There has been no answer to this day, no rhyme or reason to why this man should have vanished to end up dead across the country, and only to have his mystery solved by random chance a decade later. Whatever happened to David Lewis will perhaps always be elusive. But what do you think happened to David Lewis? I do want to hear from you. Please comment below. In any case, if you do like this channel and you want to see more, please subscribe. If you're already subscribed, please like, because any engagement does help the channel grow. Once again, thank you so much for your support.